Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Rachel. I've come to Singapore a number of times to do these talks for CCH. First time in Malaysia for KL. Normally this particular session takes probably a little bit over an hour to go through. So what I'm going to do, since we're a little bit short of time, is to go through it in a bit of a quick fire process. If you have any questions or you want to stop me or ask me about anything, please just stick up your hand. I'm more than happy to be interrupted during the presentation. You don't need to keep your questions to the end. What I'm going to talk about today is strategy and marketing and practice firms. I know some of you are not working in accounting firms, but even if you're working in other types of organizations, a lot of this, or most of this, 99% of this is still absolutely applicable to those organizations. It's about being more client-centric, more market-oriented, but the examples I use and the application of some strategy and marketing approaches need to be adjusted for professional services, so there will be some differences there. Okay? Let me just go through quickly to the objectives. Understand what strategy is, a marketing is a practice firm, and how it differs from traditional views of strategy. You know, some of you may have done business at college, some of you may have read books by Michael Porter. Anybody? Did you MBA? Anybody? Yeah, load of rubbish, we're not going to talk about that today. Philip Kotler, anybody? Marketing books, the 4 Ps, the 7 Ps. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm not going to talk about promotion. I'm not going to talk about advertising. I'm not going to talk about public relations. I am not going to talk about marketing, how you view marketing, because it has absolutely no applicability to professional service firms. I am going to talk about marketing, how it applies to professional service firms, how marketing and strategy are the same thing, and how, if you adopt a marketing culture, you will become more competitive, and you will grow your business, and you will drive profitability. So all of the things you think about marketing, you know, promotion, advertising, public relations, we can't do this, websites, I'm not going to talk about any of that because it's all a waste of time. I'm going to talk about something that you've probably not heard this particular view. I hope by the end of this presentation, your view of marketing and strategy and how they apply to professional service firms will be different forever. And if you read any book by Michael Porter, if you do an MBA and you get your, you know, your marketing management book from Philip Kotler or whatever, and the professor starts talking about the 4 Ps and blah, 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 you stick up your hand and say, yes. But this guy I heard spoke about this. Why haven't you talked about this? Because this is not stuff that you find in traditional approaches or MBA courses. And I'll give some guidelines and some examples and also a couple of case studies for E and Y as another one. Some quick depressing statistics. Results of a survey conducted by the Managing Partners Forum in the UK. This is a forum of different managing partners from the different professional services organisations, accounting firms, law firms, architectural engineering, so on and so forth. This is what they found out when they interviewed them about what was happening within their firms in terms of the outcomes of strategy. So we've got 25% and 30% of North American firms said they were dissatisfied, blah, blah, blah. Some 25% of UK firms and over 50% of North American firms said they were dissatisfied whether it created any meaningful differentiation. And this is a very key thing. For you to stand out in the marketplace, you need to be differentiated, agree? You can't be differentiated in the same way that consumer goods are. Because differentiation is much, much harder to achieve in a professional services firm environment. I can give you my new iPhone and you can have my Samsung phone and you can compare them, right? Oh, well, this one goes to Facebook, this one loads faster, this one does this one does that. But when you're comparing those particular two products, how does that happen in a professional service firm? It happens when the professionals are talking to your clients. The credence quality of those experiences is how you differentiate one firm from another. That is much, much harder to achieve, and this is why I'm going to talk about marketing in a much more systemic way than you may have seen it before. So this is how most professional service firms think about strategy or developing a marketing plan or developing a strategic plan. SWOT analysis, you've all heard of that. Yeah? I'm not saying it's a waste of time, I'm not saying it's rubbish. I'm just saying the applicability to a professional service firm is very limited. And there are other things which are more important which come first. You know, making a plan, I don't know whether some of you, if you work in the bigger accounting firms, whether it was Ants in the past or E&Y or whatever, you know, you've probably been involved in these types of engagements for your clients in some cases. You may have developed a nice glossy strategic plan, 200 pages, and next time you walk into your client's office, it's being used to hold the door open. It's not uncommon. Top management decision making. Strategy is about top management. We are top management, we'll tell you what you're going to do. Unique market position. Very, very difficult. Accounting firms or other types of practice organizations, law firms, You know, they're all targeting very similar clients with very similar types of services or products, if you want to call them products. And in many cases, clients do not see any difference between one firm and another firm. Because to them, an audit is an audit. What's special about your audit? Differentiation, but when I talk about differentiation, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more systemic manner as opposed to the typical way that many professionals look at it based on what they understand about consumer goods marketing and strategy. Environmental analysis, you know, whether it's political, economic, whatever, it's finite, it's measurable. I'll do my strategy, here's my strategy, now here's the document, now we'll just go back to work as normal like we did yesterday. Of course, nothing's going to change because strategy development and strategy implementation happen at the same time. They're ongoing, they don't end. It's a never-ending process. If you expect it to end, then you're misguided. It's not related to me, unless I'm the most senior partner. You know, if I'm a junior partner, somebody who doesn't get involved in executive meetings or this type of thing, well, it's not related to me. No, strategy is related to everybody, particularly if you want it to be effective. But all those things I listed, not particularly effective if you think about them in isolation, because professional service firms are different. The product resides in the structural, social, and human capital of the firm. Knowledge and learning in key. How do you get people, how do you motivate people to share knowledge within the firm? I mean, in law firms, for example, which I spend quite a lot of my time with, are very bad examples. You can't even get one partner sitting in one office and the partner sitting next to him in the next office to share the information. So how are you going to do it spread across different practices, different services, even across different offices if you're a larger firm? It becomes very, very difficult. Intellectual capital is the source of client value and wealth creation. So intellectual capital needs to be built upon, needs to be developed, it needs to be shared within the firm, and it needs to be applied to client problems in the development of services and products. Key market is the professional who interacts with clients. I mean, many people from my consulting experience, when professional service firms are having problems with profitability, with client retention, they say, oh, I tell you what we'll do. There's two things we can do. We can hire somebody to do a sales training course, and magically our business problems will disappear. Not from my experience. The number two thing we could do is we could hire a marketing person. Because if I'm the senior partner, I don't do marketing. See, marketing's below me. Yes. But if I hire a marketing person, they're dirty, they can do it by themselves. No, it doesn't work. Absolutely not. Differentiation is much harder to achieve, and I've mentioned that already, and I'll touch on this a little bit later as we go into the presentation. And professionals don't take easily to being managed. You know, you try to force, I mean, I don't know whether you have experienced a good example when Sawhney was talking about IntelliConnect. If any of you have examples of using new knowledge sharing platforms within your firm, let's just say, for example, like an intranet. Now, it's okay to have an intranet, it's a great thing to have, but it's a different thing to get people to use it, to share information on it. It's very, very difficult. So if you're going to change, do something within your firm, it doesn't matter what you call it, but we'll just use the word strategy, then you need to involve people within the firm. It's bottom up. It's not the same as a consumer goods firm. You know, you don't have that typical authority like you do in any traditional organization, because when you're managing professionals, and particularly other partners, they're co-owners. They can just tell you to go to hell, maybe even take their book of business somewhere else, which is very often the case. So, the implications of those negatives that we just looked at. Strategy, in my opinion, involves everyone or no one. If you don't get everyone on board, understanding it, even giving feedback to the process, it's not going to work. Strategy must move beyond the positioning perspective. I mentioned Michael Porter earlier. His whole theory of strategy is based on positioning. We're going to have this product or service, we're going to target this particular market, and we're going to be unique in this particular market niche or place. But unfortunately for professional service firms, I haven't found that to be effective. It just doesn't apply. When intellectual capital is the key source of wealth creation, then it's the internal competencies of the firm which become central to the strategy process. Not some external analysis about finding, oh, let me use a perceptual map to find a unique market position. What are the concepts? So if you've got a Michael Porter book, burn it, or throw it in the dustbin, or just send it to me because I need some extra copies. So what things could we consider when we talk about strategy? Strategy is a much bigger word than you can possibly imagine. It involves the degree of formality. Some organizations are very, very informal, but they're very successful. Some firms or some organizations have a very formal strategy process where they will go through some sort of SWOT analysis, where they will go through an environmental analysis and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but it needs to be a mixture of both. Vision. Do you have a vision? Who set the vision? You know, does everybody within the firm agree with the vision? Do you need a vision? Yeah, but it's much more holistic. This is the biggest problem I found in my experience the last 10 or 15 years working with professional service firms. Cognition, mindset, and biases. If, for example, when you heard that I was going to talk about strategy and marketing, most of you must have thought about, when I say marketing, what do you think about? Promotion? Website? Brochure? Yeah, that's your mindset, that's your bias. What I'm talking about marketing as a culture, as a systemic approach to becoming more client-centric or more client-oriented. So if we can't change the mindset of people within the firm, you may as well absolutely give up with any detailed or systemic intervention in terms of developing strategy or marketing, because people will always go back to doing the same thing that they've always done. We can't change their mindset. It's also about learning. Learning has a very big impact on profitability and competitiveness. Not just training, you know, typical training, let's bring in a trainer to do technical, whether it's technical training or whether it's practice management training. But training which goes, learning which is on the job and so on and so forth. Power and negotiation, very important part of strategy, the culture, values and history. Change and transformation and firm business model. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that in the professional services industry, particularly within accounting firms and law firms, the business model is changing. Yeah, and there are possibilities now that, for example, accounting firms, Dr. Singley's presentation, I made a couple of notes here. He mentioned one about being an intermediary. You're an intermediary, right, between whatever it was and your client. There are chances for you to be disintermediated. People can go directly to the internet, work with advisors who may be, you know, not even in the same country. Download documents, where there happen to be M&A documents or different types of advisory documents, intelligence systems which allow them to enter questions, to change the documents, to send it out to somebody you'll never see who will review the document and so on and so forth. So in terms of business model, strategy is about accounting firms becoming more competitive, embracing technology, embracing other types of opportunities, whether it's outsourcing, so on and so forth, and getting away from, which I think is the biggest bane of most professional service firms, the billable hour model. Most clients hate it. Most people within the firm hate it. Hate filling in timesheets, hate thinking of themselves as a billable hour machine. And in fact, research shows that it's one of the key factors which causes the most dissatisfaction within firms. Now, if you're a smaller accounting firm and one of your biggest problems is hiring quality people, retaining quality people, well, just kill the billable hour. You'll have solved half your problems. And then you'll say to me, yeah, but if I kill the billable hour and kill timesheets, how will I track what people do? What do you mean? How will you track what people do? Can't you track what people do by the outcome of their work product? Like every other organization in the world? That's what you could do. And that's what many, many firms are doing. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking about moving from hard KPIs, like number of billable hours, to soft KPIs, like strategic thinking, communication skills, leadership, so on and so forth. And I've got some examples of firms which are moving towards that. E&Y, I'm not sure how clear this came out on your... this is a case study, a quick case study of E&Y. I'm not sure how clearly this came out on your handouts, but a few years ago, E&Y were very focused on enhancing their market leadership within certain segments of the market and developing their leadership capabilities. So they developed this very, very nice diagram. This diagram is courtesy of my partner Jeff, who used to be the Chief Knowledge Officer at Ernst & Young for Far East Asia for about 10 years. So they've got different things in here. You know, we have shared values, we have account centricity, being client-centric, global mindset, operational excellence, and these are all the different things. So we concentrate on our people, the quality of our work, growth, and then market leadership, all these different things. So this was their original, if you like, strategy idea, beginning of their strategy process. How are we going to develop market leadership in the different areas we wanted? So this is what they decided to do. They wanted to move towards market leadership by creating a difference in the minds of the firm's clients and peoples. And I've already mentioned to you, in my opinion, most of the differentiation between one professional service firm and another occurs in the interaction between the professional and the client. if you can't change the mindset of professionals within the firm to become more commercially oriented, to understand their clients, because not just from a technical tax or accounting perspective, but clients want you to understand their business, know what's happening in their business, knowing what's happening with their competitors, so on and so forth. If you can't get that, then you will really struggle to become differentiated. So this is what E&Y were focusing on. They wanted to change these daily interactions between the client and the professional. They understood it required a cultural change. And when I say to you the word culture, it's not something which I consider to be very, accountants don't like the word culture because it's not hard. It's not something that can be measured. You're all numbers people, you like ROI, well 2 times 2 is 4. There's no such thing with culture, I'm afraid. It's something which has the biggest impact on firm performance, but it's something which is very difficult to put your finger on. But I'm going to talk about culture a little bit later in the presentation. I mentioned the word already, a marketing culture, which is the one that has the most significant impact on firm performance. So their starting point, leadership. Why did E&Y start with leadership? This is why. Because, and if as numbers people, you must like empirical research. And this comes from empirical research. So there's one diagram you should be happy with. Yes? So this is from hundreds of studies which demonstrate, also in the professional services sector, which demonstrate the link between leadership, market orientation, which is a marketing culture, which I've been talking a little bit and we'll talk more, and financial performance. So leadership is the foundation. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about you will do this because I said so. I'm talking about transformational leadership. I'm talking about leadership which motivates and inspires people to do things and to change. Participative, supportive. Most professionals, honestly, are not great at leadership or don't have a fantastic understanding of leadership because they're technically oriented. And this leads to developing a knowledge and market orientation. I'm not talking about knowledge management, but I'm talking about a knowledge orientation. Do you take an interest in your clients' industries? Is it expected of everybody? Does everybody understand that they should share knowledge within the firm? And they should collect knowledge. So they should feedback knowledge from client engagements or from meeting potential clients, so on and so forth. Let's just use a very, very simple example before we go to the next slide. Knowledge management systems. People have intranets in their firm? Yep. And how well are they used? Well, useful, contributes to performance. Most of you don't look very happy with it. So. Well, what about, for example, moving beyond intranets to other types of knowledge sharing? Which of your firms or anybody in the firm has moved to any sort of Web 2.0 technologies? Whether it's social media, whether it's, for example, like wikis. Anybody using this? Anybody going to stick up their hand? No? Not overly familiar. Okay, and I mention this one every time when I go to Singapore because it's always the same group of people in Singapore. So I hope from the first session to the last session, they will have finally did what I told them to do. Who is using a personal knowledge management system on their desktop? For example, using a feed reader where they can RSS feeds into the reader so they can keep up to date with the different journals, newspapers, magazines, or anything in their industry, their client's industry. Anybody using that? One? I'm glad to see Dr. Smith because as a fellow speaker, he should be on the edge of technology. Anybody else? Anybody not know what is RSS? Not a feed reader? Or too embarrassed to stick up their hand? The thing, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back, Google it when you get back to the office, research it, see what I'm talking about. So they started with leadership. The objective was to create a change in the leadership demonstrated by key E&Y partners and this shared vision within the firm. And these are all words, management words that you'll be familiar with. So they created a passionate group of implementers. So these were a group of senior partners and other people who were passionate about the need for change within the firm, and they would be involved in this particular process. And so they embarked on this 9-month development program. And this is roughly how it looked. But before we get to the 9-month development program, I want to touch on this thing, why they keep talking about this idea of values here. You see this? And values. This is from an empirical study by David Maister. Has anybody seen this research or heard of David Maister? Anybody read a book by David Maister? Anybody know who I'm talking about? David Maister is a fat American guy, used to be a Harvard professor, retired now. Probably the most preeminent consultant within the professional services sector. A number of years ago he published a book called Practice What You Preach, and what he wanted to identify, what were the key values within a professional service firm that impacted financial performance. And so from a list of 60 or 70 statements, he got it down to 9 factors. And what he found was, if firms lived and breathed these different values, they outperformed their competition substantially in terms of financial performance. So you can look at some of the dotted lines are correlation, the solid lines are supposed to show causation. So we have examples: long-term orientation, training development, so on and so forth, empowerment, coaching, high standards. So how he developed this research was he interviewed the senior partners within the firm and said, what do you do, how do you drive performance in your firm, so on and so forth, and they all said this, this and this. And then what he did is he subsequently interviewed the juniors and other people within the firm, said, your boss says this, do they really do it? And he found within the firms that said yes. So for example, if the boss said, look, we demand high standards, and if people don't achieve high standards within the firm, we try to upgrade them or we let them go. And then he would corroborate that with other people within the firm. And so he found that those organizations, or rather those professional service firms that did that, substantially outperformed the competition. So all of these different values and employee satisfaction led to quality and client relationships, which then led to financial performance. So if you see the link between employee satisfaction and client relationships, quality and client relationship, this is known as the service profit chain. There's a lot of research which supports the service profit chain. If you can create satisfied employees and satisfied professionals, it will drive quality client relationships, which drives financial performance. So there's another good reason to get rid of the billable hour and timesheets, since it's dissatisfied. Again, you need to think about the firm. I went back to that word vision about strategy. What kind of firm do you want to be? Do you want to be a firm which is engaging, doing interesting work, challenging work, is an interesting place for people to work, or do you want it to be a factory, which most accounting firms tend to be? And many people within accounting firms and other professional service firms think of themselves as factory workers. Now you laugh, because it's quite funny really, in some ways, and very sad in other ways, that lawyers, accountants, architects, engineers, the type of people that I tend to work with on a daily basis, are the pinnacle of knowledge workers within our society. But how do we judge their performance? We judge them the same way that somebody works in McDonald's. You clock in and you clock out. And you fill in timesheets in between. It's ludicrous. So this is when I say a business model within professional services needs to change. So why focus on values? Because research like this supports has a big impact.